we can all see. Members of the public, if you are able to keep your camera off, that is helpful, and you can certainly turn it on if you are commenting or speaking to the group. So welcome to the steering group meeting. I'm just going to go quickly and have steering group members introduce themselves. I'll call on you in the order I can see you, though I can't see everyone. Craig, you are first.
Good morning, Craig Bolio, Tax Commissioner.
Thank you. And Nicole, you're next.
Hi, Nicole Mace. I'm representing the Vermont School Boards Association.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Good morning, Jennifer Deck Samuelson, Chair of the Vermont State Board of Education.
Zoe.
Hi, good morning. I'm Zoe Saunders, Interim Secretary of Education.
And Anne Cummings, I think you are here. Maybe not. Okay. Anne Cummings is a member of the steering group. She was here for a minute and now, so we'll welcome her back. And Peter Conlin, who's also on the steering group, is not able to make it today. I'm Megan Roy. I'm the chair of the commission. And can I have a motion to approve the minutes from September 16th, minutes of the steering group?
I'll move.
Thanks, Jennifer. Second.
Second.
Thanks, Craig. Any questions, changes or discussion?
There we go.
Hi, Anne.
Hello. Sorry, I'm running late. My mentor or mentee, Tucker, is with me this morning.
Hi, Tucker.
Hi.
Welcome.
Okay.
All right. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any objections? Abstentions? Hearing none, we don't need to do a roll call, so the minutes are approved. Are there any amendments to the agenda, steering group members, for today? We have one major item. Is there anything else steering group members want to check in on? Okay. We will have a brief opportunity for public comment at the beginning and end of today's meeting. So if there are any members of the public who would like to address the steering group, please raise your hand or unmute. Thank you. I see Sharon Henry.
Yes, good morning, Megan, and thank you so much for letting me know about this meeting today. I'm from Heinsberg, Vermont, and I'm a member of the Deaf, Hard of Hearing, Deaf Blind Advisory Council. And did you share, Megan, my comments and my attachments to the email with the group? So you obviously, I hope the steering group realizes the concern. I support your work and share your frustration about the access to the data. I know that Zoe's working very hard at the AOE to address the infrastructure issues in terms of the data. But I just want to make a couple of comments in terms of the lack of cooperation from the AOE. So the council cannot do its work, which is a legislative mandate to assess the services for deaf, hard of hearing, deaf, blind here in Vermont. And we haven't gotten cooperation from the AOE grantee either. So we're unable to do our work, even though it's very important work and we're very committed to it. But I think the other important thing, so I echo what's in your data framework in terms of the need for demographic data, and also very importantly for the disaggregated student performance outcome data, because I have gotten the performance data, but it's aggregated for all students in Vermont, and that doesn't help the particular low incidence disability group that we happen to be legislatively charged to assess. And I think the other important thing for the commission or for the steering group to appreciate is that I guess my question to the group is, how will you assess the accuracy of the data that you get? The one small example that I gave you is that the students who are deaf, hard of hearing that are on IEPs that are reported to the federal government, that's required to report to the federal government, is far underreported because of system issue challenges here in Vermont, where a student may have multiple disabilities and deaf, hard of hearing is only one of them, but it isn't the primary one reported. And I'm concerned that as we look at budget cuts, which are clearly necessary, that someone may say, well, the AOE grants about $1 million to a vendor each year to service children in the state of Vermont who are deaf, hard of hearing, deaf, blind. And why is it only 60 students? Why are we giving $1 million to serve only 60 students? Obviously, that doesn't count the children who are on 504s, but you see where I'm going with this point. So my question to the commission is going to be, how will you assure the accuracy of your data, given the lack of data infrastructure that Zoe has aptly addressed and has pointed out that we need to address that. And then I think the last point is, in terms of the budget model, which isn't necessarily the responsibility of this particular subgroup, but as we look at funding models, can we move away from funding low incidence disability groups that don't change over time, move them from a 1-year model to perhaps a 3-year or 5-year model? Because once a child is deaf or hard of hearing, that doesn't necessarily change over time. And therefore the need for the services wouldn't change over time. So thank you for your work. Let's work towards assessing the data, getting the demographic and the necessary outcome data that we need. Let's ensure and be transparent about how we ensure the accuracy of that data, and then be realistic about the budget models and how it serves these students, particularly those who are from low incidence disability groups. Thank you very much. Any questions or any clarification?
No, we won't have a back and
Okay.
forth during public comment, Sharon, but
Okay.
but no, I appreciate your comments and the written ones as well. And those will be
Okay.
in the minutes attached to today's session.
And if anyone has any follow-up, Megan has my email address. And Zoe, I look forward to hearing from you after you look into your folks at your agency. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon, for your service. I actually do have an update for you. We have an Excel spreadsheet around the data request and what we collect and what's not available, and an explanation. So we'll follow up on that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great. All right, seeing no other hands, I'm gonna move us on. We do have another opportunity for comment at the end of the meeting if folks would like to do that. So steering group, our discussion item today is keeping us moving forward on the preliminary report. As of the last commission meeting, I have a draft that you all have seen that I'll be sending to the full commission, really after I make sure that I have the support of the steering group for how it is organized. So I think that for today, there's 3 related conversations that we were going to have. One is actually related to data. It is to just pick up the data framework that the commission looked at last time it met. We had a little bit of a status update on each of those items, and I took some notes myself, but I want to affirm the notes that I took and sort of see where we are with each piece of those data. Then I would like to talk about the structure of the report, really just a kind of a high level affirmation or not of how the report is organized. And then I think it would be helpful if the steering group gave some direction to the finance subcommittee who've organized their work in a way that I think is going to be really useful for the commission with some clarification. So does that sound okay to the steering group? Okay. So
Actually, do we have an opportunity to comment on the specifics in this draft, or do you want to hold that off until we meet as a full commission?
well, so the way that I typically would handle, it depends on what you mean by specific. So when the draft goes out, I would want everyone as the default writer of the report to provide input. And if it is about which I welcome, to be clear, grammar, organization, wording, things like that. I want those comments. They would come directly to me through email. Well, people are usually pretty good at that. What I think need to be surfaced that you would also send to me would be substantive. I don't think you have that right, or there is a missing piece of information, or I'm not sure we've agreed on that. Those are the conversations that we need to have as a full commission. It would be helpful for me to have them. And today, when we do this, the feedback on the structure of the report, I would want to surface that here with the steering group. It's part of why only the steering group has seen the draft at this point, because I don't want to circulate a draft that's not conceptually. So does that answer the question, Jennifer?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So data, I mean, I'm looking at the data framework that the full commission looked at last time. And I'm happy to kick this off. I have the notes that I took that I thought I would run through, because I think honing in on what are we reasonably going to be able to have by the writing of this preliminary report, I think is an important piece of data. We know that as a commission, we want to look at all of this information that is here, and we know we won't have all of it by December, and that's kind of the nature of this work. But it is a bit of a status update, what is possible to have by then. So I'm just going to start. I can
Megan, just so you're, I mean, the purpose of the December 15th report is sort of initial findings or something like that. And so I would think in that context of presenting some findings, some data might be helpful to use. And so that's the purpose of this status check, is what do we think we could or should include in the report as a data set?
Absolutely. And I think it's a combination of what data are we actually including, and then also including in the report data that we want to look at and make part of our work, but that we don't have yet as of the writing of that report. Yeah, Zoe.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I can walk you through a couple pieces. So we've made some updates on our website that are descriptive of what to expect in the updated re-release of the state profile. And we've also compiled on an Excel file all of the different data requests, an understanding of the source of that request, the status, and any additional notes that would provide helpful context. The Excel file is not formatted right now in a great way. It's a little bit messy, but I'd be happy to kind of walk you through how that's organized so you can see the level of specificity, and we'll work to format this in a way that can be shared broader, if that would be helpful. So those are two updates I would like to share if this is the right time to do that.
I think that would be helpful. That may actually be what I was thinking, and I would much rather work off of what you have. I can always come back to things in our framework if they're not covered, but let's start with what you have. That's great.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to start with the visual that looks nicer first, and then we'll get into the Excel. So this is on our website related to the Listen and Learn section. And so you have here a note about what will be included in the re-release of the state profile report. So this is right now in its final stage of data validation with the field, and we will be re-releasing this by, I think, November 22nd is our date. And so you'll find in here that we are providing significantly more context just around the education ecosystem to promote an understanding of how we fund education. We also have made some corrections to the total enrollment for accuracy. And so this also has made some shifts in how we have grouped supervisory unions and school districts as part of that initial analysis. If you'll recall, in the state profile report, we looked at overall trends by size of supervisory union and district, and also by need. And so as we're going through and making some of these corrections and updates, there are some shifts. So one thing I would note also that's important is at the state profile level, the statewide trends hold. Where you might see adjustments would be within kind of a 5% adjustment range. But the work that we've been doing with schools and school districts is really going to be important for this next level of analysis as we are able to dive a little bit deeper into understanding patterns by geography of our state, by different size of our supervisor unions and districts, and also as we're starting to compare similar schools and districts. So I think this work is really important to doing that next level of analysis, and also to provide more specificity around the data that goes into the original state profile report. So we had talked about in a couple instances there was some misalignment. So that has been corrected as we are reporting expenditures. There was some work that we've been doing in the field to make sure that things have been accurately coded, because we have seen that there's been some inconsistencies with coding in the field over the years. And so we've been going back and doing a double check. So all of those adjustments make some changes to the what you will see in the report. So I just want to pause there because you can kind of read through and get a little bit more detail around what to expect in that re-release. But I'll pause there to see if there's specific questions. Yeah, Nicole.
Thanks, Zoe. I note in the last sentence of the additional analysis on expenditures, you indicate that the sort of identification of federal funds versus state funds. I'm not sure, what that looks like, but just want to say I'm appreciative. I think that's been one piece that particularly, and again, sort of the difference between the listen and learn data sets and the commission's data sets, really being able to hone in on what is the state's education fund, what are property taxes in the state paying for. That I'm happy to see that, and I'm eager to see the re-release to unpack that a little bit. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So wherever possible, we're showing it in a stacked bar chart so you can see the different source of the funding. And we're, to respond to your comments, it's different. They're answering different questions, right? And so when we're looking at the overall expenditure, that's really important as we're thinking about how we're funding educational services for students. It's a very student-centered perspective. When we're looking at the ed fund spending, it's really applicable to taxpayers, and I think very applicable to the work of this commission in thinking about those recommendations. So we want to have a holistic approach, but while still making sure we're responding to the additional needs of the committee and looking at that at a finer level and understanding the impact to taxpayers. So we will also, with this re-release, there'll be the backup data as well. So I know in the initial public comment, there were questions around data validation. So we've gone through that process, and to promote greater transparency, we'll also be providing the data files and recipe cards. And so those recipe cards provide an explanation around how to arrive at the calculations. And so that will help at a school and district level where they can recalculate it as well to validate the numbers. So that'll be another check and balance that we're building into all of our subsequent reporting, and you'll see in the re-release of the state profile report. Questions on what to expect in the re-release? I'm just looking if there's anything. And I think the important point as we look at interpreting that re-release is that the narrative of the state profile hasn't changed. But in other words, while you're seeing minor shifts, the trends are not changing. And it tells the same statewide story across the data points. But what this allowed us to do, as I talked about last time, is going a little slow to then go fast, right? So we had to kind of do this deeper dive in order to be able to deliver on some of the subsequent reporting, which I'll walk through next on the Excel file. Okay, I'm going to switch to, can you see my screen, or do I need to stop sharing? And then I think I need to stop sharing and then. Okay, I'm going into, for those that love data and Excel spreadsheets, you're going to really enjoy this. For those that don't, I apologize. So I'm going to share. Can you see my screen?
I think you're among friends here, Zoe, so.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to orient you to how this is laid out and kind of give you a high level overview of what's included in this framework to make sure we have a check that everything is incorporated that has been requested. And then we can go into the specifics around notes where we are identifying some limitations in terms of what we can report based on the data now. So to orient you to what you're looking at, we've column A is listing the data request. So we've combined the request that we received from the commission along with a separate request from the chair of the Education Finance Subcommittee. And so you'll see the source of the request in column B. We provided a short description. In some areas, we will note that we might need to validate that that's what is being asked because there's a difference between asking for a data set and asking us to answer a certain question, right? And so that's where we need to have discussion to make sure that as an agency, we're pulling in the right information to actually answer the question as opposed to just providing a file, if that makes sense, because the file may not be answering the question that you're trying to ask. So we'll indicate here a status. So we are tracking to provide several updates with the re-release of the state profile report, which would be November 22nd. And then you'll see another date for an update for the Education Finance Subcommittee. We've included the data source for all of the request. And then the note section is helping us to provide further context. This is particularly relevant as we're thinking about comparing multi-year data. In some instances, it is challenging for us to fully recreate that because we may not have collected data in that specific way in order to show that consistent trend line. But those are the types of notes that we're providing here, along with making sure we're clear on the definitions. So just walking through the data requests, we've received a request for analysis of cost per long-term ADM going back to 2014, budgeted expenditures, offsetting revenue, education spending, and actuals all per long-term ADM. We've also received a request for actuals looking at the analysis by object and function code and breaking that further down by district budgets. That is not a level that we have done at this point. We have focused at a higher level. So this is one layer down. Looking at object and function code, I'll go back to that because there's a couple questions we have to make sure we're clear on the delivery of that. At this point, we've provided trend data around object and function code for total all-in expenditures and not isolating the ed fund, which I think is a request we've heard and already discussed today. Analysis of categorical aid and specific programs back 10 years. So I think this, Nicole, was your specific request as we look at the education outlook going back further. Special education, this was kind of a broad request. So I will share that we are actually doing a deeper dive here. And this will be a next report that we are going to release relative to program trends and spending. Transportation, I think this is broad. I think a lot of these at a high level are included within the education outlook. So certainly as we look at those broad trend lines, we'll be able to pull that together. But as I was speaking about special education, I think there's been a lot of different types of questions and it's more nuanced that will require some additional analysis beyond what we'll provide immediately. Analysis of cost drivers, tuition, school size, healthcare costs. This again is a bit of a breakdown of special ed, where you will see in some of these data sources where we have an open source file available on the website, we directly link to that to make sure that there's access. Looking at facility needs, statewide demographic projections. We have some of this related to our student demographics. If we're talking about census data, that's a little bit different, and we would need to be able to coordinate with other teams to bring that together. And then overall, just an understanding of how supervisory districts and unions are structured, number of students served, number of towns served, cost per equalized pupil. There's some additional specifics around tuitioning that have been requested, staffing, looking at specific ratios, class size, minimum and maximum salary. So we have looked at some initial salary trends at these different staffing levels, and we do have a link where you can reference that. I know Senator Cummings was looking for some specific data last time, so this link is available, and you can drill that down by school. Provisional licenses, staff retention, breakdown of the education payment, the sources of the education fund and uses, facility needs assessment, and student assessment results. I will make a note around disaggregation, and I know that came up in the public comment. We do have to do suppression. So to follow FERPA guidelines and make sure that we protect student privacy, we are not always able to drill down to the level that people would like to see in order to comply with those privacy regulations. And so those are some things that we always just need to be mindful of as we're doing comparative data and talking about disaggregation. There are limits to what we'll be able to report at the agency because of those guidelines for protecting student privacy. And then absenteeism, discipline, and then MTSS. So that's the full list that we're working on right now. And so I wanted to first start and validate that we have captured everything correctly. And if there's anything missing, that I can add it to a row here and provide the additional detail of where we are and what to expect with reporting.
Thanks, Zoe. This is incredibly helpful. I'm going to let the steering group respond to that last question. And then I have a follow-up about how and in what form we might want to integrate this into our report. But first, just sort of, does this capture the requests that we have talked about as a commission?
Yes, and I think there's some duplication, as you noted, Zoe. So I think if we're gonna share back out, just eliminating that so it can be a little bit more concise. But
I hear that.
I think it's I'm not aware of any request that's missing as you went through it.
Okay.
And I think what's helpful is date, in terms of date, like when can this be expected? What's a reasonable expectation? That's very helpful in terms of managing. This is very complex, and it's, as I said at our last meeting, long overdue, and it takes time. And it's more helpful to people if they know a timeline with which they can expect to see some stuff. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear your point too, as we think about how to share this to make sure that everyone's aware of the timeline. There's some consolidation that we can do. This first pass was just to be as detailed as possible to make sure that it was reflecting back every single request so that people saw their request in this file. But we'll need to do a little bit of shaping of this so that it's helpful for the broader commission and I think the public.
Other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Nicole.
Sorry, I have more thoughts. So in the context of report and findings, I just wonder whether we could have a quick discussion around of the things that are available, what makes sense for the commission to highlight. We could always sort of link to the state profile report, but I think it's probably more having some demonstrating some level of understanding of the situation and how it connects to some of the things that are called out in the draft report. I don't want to be issuing a report that has statements that are not grounded in a data set that's clearly identified. And so I'm just curious, I guess from your perspective, Megan, as the default author thing, how that might take shape for you.
Well, that's exactly the conversation that I would love to hear from the steering group on. And a related piece, for example, is, well, my perspective in general is that the more this report can be really broad about what we've done, the more likely we will be as a commission to gain or retain credibility, which I think is really important. So there is a piece of me that thinks a version, maybe not the spreadsheet version, but a version of this that's accessible as a, here are all the things that we intend to do and here's when we will get them. I actually think that my perspective, obviously I'm posing that because this will be a report of the commission, but from my perspective, it's important. So a version of what Zoe just shared in a accessible format, I actually think is useful. Then part 2 is exactly what you just said, Nicole, which is that the other way to gain credibility is to have some sort of set of recommendations. And if we are contemplating those have to be backed up by data. And I'll say a third thing that's on my mind, and then I think I would love to just hear the steering group talk about it. In the if we are referencing data, you'll see, I mean, in the draft that the steering group saw, I have a bulleted list of things that I feel like the commission has said they want to report out on. But it is just a bulleted list. It's not a summary of some of those data points, which is what you're asking for, Nicole, and appropriately, right? But to be really transparent, there is a bandwidth issue as the writer of this report. I have a very generous employer, and St. Michael's is allowing me a lot of time, but there is a limit to that. And so depending on what the commission wants to put in this report as a report of that data, I think that's worth a conversation. It's also a pin in a conversation that has been sort of raised and then lowered several times, which is what other consultation and support does this commission need moving forward? So that's a different question. But I from where I sit, I think it is helpful to share this kind of summary. And then I think it's important for the commission to say, and here are the 2, 3, 4, I don't know what the number is. Here are the few things that we actually need a summary of findings. That I think is worthwhile conversation to have. I actually might start with a logistical question. Zoe, you had talked about I think that you had said, or I just wanted to hear you say that that there's going to be like a front-facing version of this spreadsheet. And if that is in the works, maybe that is something that can just be inserted in this report, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I would, whatever, we can do to help support, I think that makes sense, right? I mean, we're working all from the same data and information. And so I think where we can have consistency, it's actually really helpful, right? Because we're all working off the same information and working toward the same goal. So we're trying to figure out how to format this in a way that's public facing, I will share. But we'll get there. I'm not sure that we'll get there today, but at least I think we can, as a commission, see this as a working document. And I'm happy to share this version just for your visibility. And then we'll work on formatting this in a way that can be better used in the field. And then I do think as we're looking at the data, we do know some of the high level trends, and that can be something we pull into a data section of this report. Nicole had mentioned being able to reference the re-release of the state profile report. That is one way that we can do that, and there are some broad trends there. We're bringing in some additional data that's going to come before the Education Finance Subcommittee that is another layer down, and I think it would be valuable to highlight some broad trends in that work as well. And again, wherever we can, I think it's important for us to include the backup documentation and the source data. I think we're seeing that that's going to be really important for building credibility with data and being really transparent.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. And for me, it's like that's a placeholder section of the report. If we know that we will have some, and frankly, it could also just be that spreadsheet, the most recent version, when we get close to December 15th, that I can just put that into a, a non-spreadsheet version. Or depending on the status of the front-facing version, that would be embedded in. That's helpful.
One thing I would note also is I think it's helpful to identify the data and what we're trying to understand from that data, along with what it might inform. Because and that also will be a validation point for us at the agency as we're putting together that information, again, to make sure that we're bringing in the right data files. And so we've been seeing that throughout this process is as you're requesting data, what are you hoping to learn about? Because we might actually suggest you bring together another data source than the one that was actually requested. And so moving away from kind of the literal request to what is the goal around what you're trying to achieve, and always being able to provide the data, but making sure that we're really clear around how that data is being is needed to inform decisions, because it'll help us to bring in some other variables that would be supportive of that decision making as well. So I'm thinking as we structure this for the commission report, it's here's the data, here's what it's helping us to understand, and here's how it might help inform policy recommendations.
Yeah. Nicole.
When I think about I think we're going to get to this in a little bit, but my hope is that I don't know that the Education Finance Committee is going to arrive at 2 to 3 recommendations, right? So the process right now is we're reviewing a lot of different ideas that have been put on the table and sort of evaluating when they could be implemented and when they would have an impact. And I think it would be helpful. And some of that is like, I think the 2 main buckets is, how to reduce the property taxes or pressure on property taxes, and how to address cost drivers. And so I would hope that we could present some data that connect to those cost drivers and inform how we raise and spend money in a manner that impacts property taxes. So because if those are that's like the nexus of the recommendations, it would be important to have some data around that, even if it's not complete or at the grain size that we would find to be, particularly actionable, that like more work would need to be done. I think it is important to present that what information we have available to us that goes beyond sort of the high level statewide trends to some of the factors that underlie the list of options that are being considered by the commission and will be considered in the legislature.
Jennifer.
So, I mean, first of all, I just want to acknowledge the monumental effort that the agency has undertaken to gather all of this data in a very, very, very short period of time. This data has not been available for years and years. And I think, as I think about what the commission has been tasked with doing and the information that the legislature wants, we can all identify that there's a problem. But until now, it's been hard to really, and even not now, like maybe by November 22nd, it's been hard to pinpoint where the pressure points are. And, even as we sit here this morning, we still don't have the data to to support, a lot of thoughts and assumptions about where those pressure points are. So I think one of the things that would be helpful to include in the report is just an acknowledgement of the fact that for years this data has not been available, and that now finally, and this commission has been around for 4 months almost, that we are finally at the point where we have this data. I'm not sure that we're going to have a chance to get on top of the data by our December 15th deadline, but I think it's a really, really important and critical first step to have received that data and to share that out, because then we can start having real conversations that are grounded in substance. So I guess, my thought is it's more important to me that we have good data out there so that we can ground our conversations, and maybe less important to think that we can get on top of that and start, putting out suggestions for cost containment. I think some things will surface, but I don't think that what we put together by December 15th is going to be the end of the story. And I think I would just encourage us to pitch this December 15th report as a really solid starting point for us to have the conversations that need to happen.
Yeah, Jennifer, I agree. And I think that we talked about this at the last full meeting. The tension is being clear about the complexity, that it's really important that this report talk about how complex it is. This first draft attempts to do that. And again, I will want and need the feedback of the commission. But for example, the part of the complexity is that it is not just one of those things. It is not just spending. It is also how we raise money. It is also how we're structured, and it's also who makes decisions. That is a really important thing, because in the ether, there are perspectives that any one of those things will fix it. So, and you can't attempt to fully analyze how you fix those intersecting things on such a short timeline. And it's important to say that. And the tension, though, is that something related to property tax relief is going to have to happen this session. So the other thing that I think is important, and it is related, and I think the finance subcommittee, of which 4 of you are here, so that is helpful, but you have started down this work, which is there are a lot of ideas. We will not, I agree. I don't think we'll be ready to circle up around any of those ideas by December, but I actually think it's important for the General Assembly to have as broad a description as possible, which is a summary of what, and again, it is again another spreadsheet, but it's a way of analyzing, here are the things, here's the data that you would need to know, here's when you would actually have impact on this. I think it's helpful for the General Assembly to have that, as long as we are very clear, this is not a chart of recommendations. This is a chart of the things that have been raised in the context of the commission and sort of the current status. Some of those things are going to be potentially actionable. Again, our job as a commission is to inform the General Assembly. So I'm just kind of agreeing, and I think we gain credibility by being as transparent as possible about all the things that have been raised, because we do face criticism that says, you're not talking about this or you're not talking about that. I actually think all of the things have been raised. We haven't had time, frankly, to undertake them, but I think it's important for people to know that they're on the table for discussion. Zoe.
I have a kind of a question that's more in the weeds, and then a broad comment. So I'll start with the weeds, just kind of getting myself out of this, and then I'll get myself out of the spreadsheet. Nicole, you had specific questions just around the cost drivers and what you want to see there. So I'd love it if you could just meet with our team and make sure we're understanding what you're looking for there. So we could set up a separate meeting and make sure that we understand your request and that that's reflected in what we're working towards. So
yeah, I mean, it's primarily staffing, healthcare, the things that we have. Yeah, but I would welcome an opportunity.
Just as you've pointed out, we have it interspersed, right? And so I just want to make sure that we're at the point now where we're trying to be crystal clear, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think sometimes we're making assumptions around, well, we think that's already reflected, and there's actually another question that you're trying to answer. So we'll be following up to just get clarity on that. Right. And then the second point, as we another resource, so through the Listen and Learn tour, we continued. I received questions around our education finance system. As we all know, it's really complicated, and we've also received requests to help clarify, to make sense of our education finance system. So we've been working with New Solutions on a report that will likely be released today that uses plain language just to explain the Vermont education finance system and also to compare our system relative to other states. And so as we look at those comparisons, it really helps to build a foundation upon which we can make recommendations for different strategies that could support us in creating a system that is more sustainable and produces great outcomes. So that will also be a resource to the commission, and it's a starting point. I would say that that report is focused more on kind of the bigger picture changes, not as much on what we're discussing right now around the short-term cost containment, but there's a lot of implications for those cost containment strategies when you look at how other states fund schools. So that will be a resource that's available also to the commission.
Thanks, Zoe. Just looking at our time right now, and I wonder if it makes sense for us to just, I'm going to pose a couple of questions. One is just from an overall structure of the draft, are folks comfortable if I push that out to the full commission? There's two different, so the draft goes to the commission. Each commission member would be asked to email me their individual feedback so that I can compile it. I think it will help our conversation on the 3rd. But I would like the steering group to affirm that they are okay with that being floated that way. Jennifer.
So let me just go out and say yes. But I had a couple of like really quick edits that you might want to just capture before you send this out, because you're probably going to get 10 emails back pointing out there were a couple little typos in there. So I'd love to correct those.
You can send those to me directly,
okay.
emails.
Yep. Okay. And then the other thing, I was really trying to figure this out. You mentioned a few times in the report the 3 policy considerations. And I went back to Act 183, and by my count, there were 5, and the 5 that are listed in Act 183 don't correlate to the 3 that we are talking about in this report. So I didn't follow the thread on that. And I, again, wondering if at least before you send the report out, I'd love to know what 3 policy considerations explicitly are being referenced, because it didn't line up with Act 183.
Well, those are the three things that this commission has agreed to organize the work, right? So that's what's in our work plan framework that the commission developed, is to separate these into the education finance system, the delivery model, which is the physical size, footprint, tech. There's a lot of things under there, and then governance. Those are the 3 policy areas that the commission has decided to organize its work. And then Act 1.3, the additional fit under those. It's a work organization structure. And so maybe part of the clarity is just explaining that that's how the commission has decided to chunk its work.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, it's helpful. Nicole?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think it was more than 5 areas. I mean, it was like 50 areas the commission was supposed to look at, and that was
5 pages,
our
but it was
best,
like
our best
ABCDE.
attempt to sort of organize it into buckets, is what I'd say. So I think that could be clarified, because the act, Jennifer's right, the act doesn't specifically say, look at these 3 things. My only feedback is on the preliminary data findings section. I wonder if we could just change that to reflect the conversation we just had, which is to say, here's, we'll have an update of we'll have some preliminary findings to be TBD, working at that are connected to the charge, and then the chart that some version of the chart that Zoe shared earlier.
Yep. Absolutely.
Other than that, I'm so appreciative, Megan. I mean, this is not an easy lift, so thank you for taking it on. And I'm sure you're going to get a lot of feedback, and thank you for weeding through the feedback.
That's fine. I don't mind that. That part I don't mind. I think the question will come. I think that's the right way to separate it: preliminary findings and then the chart. I may, depending on what we want to say for preliminary findings, I may need help with that. Although it also may be that, like, even just the description of our finance system compared to other states, if I can be pulling and quoting other things, that makes that exercise easier. So, okay. So then the second logistical thing is that, oh, let me wrap that up. I will make some changes to the draft, and I will also just let the commission know that these are some of the things that we already know we need to clarify. Part of that is just so I can get it out to people faster so they have more time to give input. Second piece is finance subcommittee. As they do their work over their next 2 meetings, one of the things that I think we should clarify is to make sure when the finance committee is looking at the brainstormed list of actions, I don't know, that's the word I've been using, that they vet those through our guiding principles as a commission, because that's how the full commission agreed to do it. It will help the full commission for the finance subcommittee to do that. So that would just be an add to the way that they are looking at that work. Anything else that we should, and I imagine that we are going to take the whatever version of their analysis has been done after their next 2 meetings is what the full commission will talk about on December 3rd, and we'll get as far as we can get, I think. Nicole.
Yeah, so I think it would be helpful, Megan, if you could communicate with Emily about the, and I just want to get a gut check of everybody here. We sort of danced around it earlier, but that the goal really at this point, because we are hampered in some ways by a really thorough data set that we can model out all these things, right? It's just to capture, here are the, there's a lot of people with knowledge and expertise on this topic who generated a list of ideas, have identified sort of timelines that need to be considered, and have, I think the chart that Emily has circulated, there's a policy goal, like here's what the policy goal and some other considerations, but then against the guiding principles. I mean, that to me is could be very useful, and would eliminate the commission's need to go through and vote on each specific thing. It's not I think you said this earlier, it's not recommendations per se. It's here's our list of feasible options. We may be missing some, but we're not in a position to make formal recommendations given the condensed timeline. But that I think that's important to convey to the finance committee, that that's our hope, to be able to use the work product of the next two meetings in the report, not to zero in on 3 recommendations. Do others agree with that?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I don't think we're ready to make recommendations, in part because we don't have the data to support any recommendations that we might make. So I think it would feel premature for us to single out, the top 3 or the top 5. I don't think we'll be there by December. We might be there by, January, February, March, and this work will be ongoing. So I think it would be good to recognize that this is, our first pass, and that we are going to continue to do our work to, analyze that data so that we can come up with some recommendations. But in the meantime, we're giving this data to the General Assembly so that it can discuss it and, make its own, further steps that it wants to follow.
Yeah, Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that we're saying to the legislature that there is no one silver bullet. And so there's going to be a lot of proposals for silver bullets, and to say that, we had time to consider this and there isn't one. So let's start talking about a broader range. I think that's probably the most helpful thing that we're going to say at this point.
Great, thanks. Okay, I will reach out. Oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
Well, just to echo what Anne said, and I know you mentioned in the report that this is a very complicated, intertwined problem, very intricate. But I mean, even saying something like "there is no silver bullet" might be helpful.
Yeah, agreed.
Not to put you on the spot, Craig, but what do you think?
I don't have any concerns. I agree with that approach. I think we should be doing what we can to help inform the legislative discussion, which is where the rubber is really going to meet the road. And so, yeah, this sounds like a fine approach to me. And I agree that I don't think we're going to have enough time to get through all of the data to do a full review to say, like, here's a bow on this. It's ready to go.
All right. So I agree. That makes sense. I will make some changes to this by the end of the week, but my goal will be to put it out by Friday. And so if I haven't made them all, then I will receive the input to make them over the next chunk of time. And again, and I'll pose this so that the full commission is thinking about it. I do want to make sure that it's also not dismissed, it meaning the report, right? Because the danger in just saying it's complicated, even though it is that people will be frustrated with the construct itself of the commission. And I think, so that's just a needle we're trying to thread. That's all. So I'll reach out to Emily around the next couple of meetings. You all that are on the committee can also convey that. And so I think that let me just look ahead to confirm. So there's 2 upcoming meetings. There's 2 finance subcommittee, the 18th and the 25th, I believe, are both on the calendar. Full commission is December 3rd. I have a question for this group. Our next meeting per our cadence would be December 16th, which is after the report goes out. I didn't know if you want an opportunity, and maybe we pick a Thursday since that has worked more than once, I think. Do we want to meet on Thursday, the 12th at this time, just for one last opportunity for the steering group to give input? It will be after our full meeting and before we hit send on the report. Yeah, Nicole.
I'm wondering if we will have a communications consultant by then, because I do think, in addition to the legislative audience, there's a public audience.
Yes.
And, I don't know whether it takes the form of a press release, but I think it would be really helpful to have the support of a communications professional so that we can help to your point, Megan, of this not being like an eye roller. They didn't come up with anything.
Mhm.
To frame it for the public consumption would be, I think, an important step. And that could be something that we talk about on the 12th, or we meet with I don't know, again, the timing, but I would appreciate that there be some communication support around this, and potentially, like, here are some opportunities to continue to stay engaged and informed in this complex work that has no silver bullet.
Perfect. No,
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that part up. We will, I anticipate having named the consultant on by then, because, well, here's the sequence. The communication subcommittee will open bids on Monday, the 18th, at its next meeting, and make a recommendation to the full commission on the 3rd of a consultant. So what I don't know, so yes, the short answer is that I believe that we will have named, there are plenty of qualified bids, so I don't anticipate coming up short. Zoe, what I don't know logistically is the time between name and executing a contract, but I would imagine that person would be willing to I don't know, that entity, I should say entity, not person. Zoe, do you know anything about timeline, like contract execution wise?
Yeah, so I know Shelley isn't on the call, but I can just share, we'll do what we can to expedite as quickly. I mean, I think the longest part of this process is having the bid open and doing the review. There are certainly steps to getting it executed, that also involve, the vendor, but we will work expeditiously to get that done.
Thanks. Okay. So does Thursday, the 12th of December at 8:30, which is just replicating this time, does that work for most members of the steering group? I got one thumbs up.
Do we want to make it longer than an hour, just in case we need it?
I am already double booked during that time period.
Okay.
I could
Well, then
do
what's one more?
Wednesday. No. I could do Wednesday, Tuesday or Wednesday of that week, or Friday. But Thursday's not great.
Wednesday works for me. Thursday, I think I'm actually at the AOE for something different.
I'm good with Wednesday that week at the 8:30 time.
Wednesday, the 11th.
Wednesday looks good.
Okay, so Maureen and Suzanne, if you don't mind, moving the currently scheduled meeting on the 16th, steering group meeting on the 16th, to be Wednesday, the 11th at 8:30, and let's make it a 90-minute meeting. Okay, thank you. All right, we are a little past our time, but if there are members of the public who would like to address the steering group, I see Sharon's hand. Hold on just a
Yeah.
second. I'm going to give folks a second to, I see a second person. I'm just going to give some wait time before. Third. Okay, I'm going to get us started. Sharon, if it's okay, since you spoke to start, I'm going to start with John and then go to Sue and then back to you, and then we'll get to other folks if they raise their hands. And folks, since we are already late, I want to make sure people can make their comments. If we go long, I may have to shorten them, but we'll try to just let you share what you need to share. John Clifford, you can start.
Can you hear me all right? Okay, well, I'll try to make this brief. I was watching a presentation recently by our school board in March from the Director of Behavioral Services on student mental health referrals. And the data that he presented was quite alarming in terms of the number of referrals for minor and major infractions in the whole process or system. So I got a light bulb in my head. I kind of wondered, well, what's that all costing the taxpayers of my school district for these services? Who's involved in these services? Psychologists, social workers, interventionists, paraeducators, whatever, what have you. And it's been really hard to try to drill down on that in terms of cost, in terms of overall personnel, in terms of the structure of the behavioral action team, the network. I understand it's computerized now. And I just would want the taxpayers of the district I'm in to kind of understand that's an associated cost that we're voting for. And then, is it effective? Are we getting our money's worth? Are these students actually going through restorative justice and getting put back into the classroom or not? And then does the number of personnel need to expand or not? I think this would be a nice item for AOE to actually add as its own category. And so that we might know that. And then also, if you plan on trying to transfer those costs to the general fund or to HHS or some other agency, just kind of having an overall understanding of that whole system and its cost. So that's just a suggestion I have. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm going to go with Sue Siglowski.
Thank you very much. I just have a short request that the commission and steering group and its the subcommittees of the commission meeting times, dates, and locations be posted on the website so that we can plan our calendars in advance. It's a little bit difficult right now because they're not posted very much in advance. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to post that information, even if you don't have the agenda ready yet or the meeting information as far as materials for the meeting, but it would be great to have the date, time, and location of the meetings that you do know in advance posted on the website for planning purposes. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Sharon, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to amplify a comment made by Jennifer, which I don't think can be underestimated, that this data wasn't around until more recently. And so I think in your report, I would love to see some way of addressing the validation of the data and how the data were validated. And I probably should disclose with you that I am a clinician researcher funded by the National Institutes of Health. So I'm used to high levels of accountability, both scientifically in my data as well as budgetarily. So I think if you could address that and you could head off that concern would be so helpful. I think the second thing that I would love to know about is what expertise are you tapping into for your analytics? Because if you have put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. And if you don't analyze it well and are not handling the data correctly, so maybe Zoe, you could speak to that, but I think it also should be included in your commission report. Again, to head off any issues in advance. And I think the other thing, given your tight timeline, another way to frame this would be to talk about primary analyses and secondary analyses, because you can't get it all done by December 15th. That's quite clear. So those would be my three suggestions. And I would love to hear Zoe speak to where is the expertise and the analysis coming from, and if not, how could we get you that support?
Thanks, Sharon. I won't put Zoe on the spot just because that's not typically how public comment works. We certainly hear you. I'm not going to stop Zoe from responding if she wanted to, but I think I think the conversation we had today includes a lot of what you are talking about. Zoe, go ahead.
I would just say that I hear the request, and I think it's really important to bring transparency to how the data are collected and validated. And so we are being more explicit in our write-ups around that process, and think it would be helpful for that to also be included in the commission. So hear that, and we'll document the process so that there's absolute clarity.
All right. Seeing no other hands, just a quick logistic for the commission is aware that it's tricky to not have the location of particularly full commission meetings in advance. That is because we are still scrambling to find them. However, we do fairly confidently think that we have locations out through April, maybe even May. And so there will be a calendar, at least of locations. But for the record, we do meet on the full commission meets on the first Monday of the month. And the subcommittees, with the exception of changes, and we did just make one today, but typically subcommittees are the third Monday of each month. And yes, there are exceptions, and we'll do the best we can to post them. But we do intend to have a calendar out with the locations of the full commission meetings pretty quickly. And then I would just echo Nicole's comment about the communication and engagement consultant. We will be supported in that area very quickly. And I think we'll be doing a much better job of marketing and advertising and making clear. So with that, we are past time. Thank you, steering group members. I think we are adjourned.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.